Welcome to week 6 of English 102 Business Writing. I know it seemed to take almost no time at all to get to the 6th week. So this is our final week together. I first of all, I'm going to offer an apology. I am about a day behind in keeping up with grading. I'm going to get through some of the other work, but the essays that were due on week 4, I'm not going to be able to finish grading until tomorrow night. Then after that, I'll make certain to get you as much of the week 5 material back by the end of Wednesday as possible. So you'll have a few days to review that before you have to hand in your final argument essays. So this week is going to seem to go by pretty fast. So among other things, you don't have a lot of reading to do. For the content interview, of course, the suggestion is go back over the readings from week 5, which are, as you'll remember, chapter 20, chapter 21, and chapter 24. And the reason for that is the argument essay, and I'll go back to the syllabus for a second. The argument essay itself is worth as much as a single week's worth of assignments. Um, so by doing your best work with the argument essay, putting in the most effort in getting written well, having it structured well, and in proofreading it well, you will uh, do about the same equivalent of work as you would in any other week. And we have other things to do as well this week. So basically, consider this week worth double the number of points. And so, if you have been worried about certain points or have been so concerned about certain grades that you wish could be better, now is the week to pull out all the stops, do your best work possible, and you'll notice some of those earlier mistakes are going to be erased by the final totals. So, this week we have several assignments: the feedback log and analysis, the argument essay, the demonstration of learning, final reflection form, and revised essays. Before we get to that, we have a couple of things to help you understand some grammar tips. This is one I find really useful for understanding the difference between active and passive voice. It's a cute little short video, and what it does is to help you understand when you're writing actively and when you're writing passively. Uh, and it's easy to remember because the zombies makes it funny. Remember the reason we push for active writing as opposed to passive writing. There are certain fields that do require passive voice, certain kinds of business writing, certain kinds of scientific writing, and things like that. But you want to always make sure you check the style and the expectations because passive voice, what it does is it separates the action and the events being discussed from an actor, from a person doing it or people doing it. And there are certain reasons to do that. Among other things, for example, in science, you want to describe a process much more than you want to describe somebody making process happen. And same thing with business. You want to describe effects of economic trends or responses to certain marketing decisions and stuff like that without necessarily attributing it to a person or people making moral choices. But active voice is always easier to read and better to read. It what it does is it makes the sentences flow faster. It makes it feel like it takes less energy to get through your writing, as well as it often assigns an action or an effect to an actor, and that is something we need to remember is actions have consequences, and when we say this person or these people made these choices and these are the results, that can be very useful. Another thing to think about is something we as native English speakers grew up learning, but we don't, most time we haven't had articulated, which means that we don't necessarily are aware of what we know, and that means we can make mistakes, which is that modifiers, adjectives and adverbs, come in a certain order that we have assumed, and they come in your opinion of it, what size it is, how old is it, what is it shaped like, what is its color, where is it from, what kind of material is it, what is it for, and so they give you an example here. You can have a lovely little old rectangular green French silver whittling knife, which is just established by tradition and habit, but you can mess with that order sometimes. And what it does is it calls attention to itself. So every time you learn a rule of grammar, it's a guideline, and you can break that rule. But what it does is call attention to itself because we're not expecting it. And so if you call attention to yourself, why are you doing it? For example, the example given here is green great dragons can't exist because of the order of operations. Well, of course, they can exist, but what that means is we are now hyper aware of the fact that they're called great dragons as opposed to dragons. And if you're writing a certain kind of thing or reading a certain kind of thing, that is something that you should be aware of, that you have now drawn attention to it. And so you should deserve that attention. You should pay it off in some way. And so there are these kinds of rules are things that you can find everywhere. I'm a big fan of looking at them and trying to think about, is this a hard and fast rule? Is this a good rule to keep aware of? That sort of thing. And you'll run across these from now forever. I still run across grammar rules that I thought I knew or I hadn't seen articulated in a certain way. The next thing, of course, is talking about how to write argument essays and better essays in general. And one thing to be aware of for essays, and this is a good article that gives you some advice about it, is that you want to be able to poke holes in some sort of material and critical thing, including other people's arguments or even your own arguments. If you can make your argument sound and not fall apart under just a casual analysis, that makes it easier to provide information to get your point across without it falling apart and without people going, well, that doesn't sound right. And of course, if you do use your argument to say, well, everybody says this is the thing I'm talking about, but in reality, this is what I'm looking at, or this is the truth of the situation, that comes across better. Make sure so always critique your own arguments. Try to think about how solid your arguments are. This article also mentions that doing things like looking at Wikipedia or other sources are good, as I mentioned before, for an overall view and overall understand things. Of course, you can't cite it, but it is always useful to get an idea. Think about what you're reading. Think about if your sources are useful for what you're interested in. And think about other kinds of things. I know some of you mentioned that you sometimes have trouble getting good sources from just one source, like or from one location, like the Cornell Library. Well, that is because it's a limited area. So the advantage of the internet is you can look anywhere you want to as long as you are still critical and thoughtful about the sources you use. That's why I mentioned things like Google Scholar and other database searches that you can look for. Or even try other libraries. If you have access to any other college libraries or even public library, that might help you too. Now, the last thing they talk about here is the introduction. And I am a big stickler for introductions. What I don't need an introduction is for you to ask me permission to talk about this. What I want from an introduction is for you to explain what you're talking about and get right to it. Many of you have shown a good good understanding of this with the process analysis and what I've read of the cause and effect essays. But even so, to emphasize it, when you say, for example, the need to learn business writing is useful because that is a strong introduction. It gets you into what you're trying to talk about and the argument you want to make. What you don't want to do is say, writing has been a tool forever. We've used this as a way to gauge other people's abilities and so on and so forth. And, businesses also value writing. What you're doing with all of that is trying to earn the right to talk about it. Assume you have the right to talk about it and get to your point. Make your thesis statement. Tell me what your argument is. Tell me what you want to say. Tell me what you're going to do. Don't ask for permission. So always try to get close to it. And of course, as I said before, never, ever, ever say in today's society or in our world today or any other cliche like that. So the assignments are pretty simple. First of all, you're going to be asked to do the feedback log and analysis. And you were asked to a couple of weeks ago to start the feedback log. So what you need to do is look at what you started, and then now you should have gone through. And again, I will be getting as all the essays and everything back to you by Wednesday night at the latest. So you can go back through there, see what your most common errors are in there. You're going to list 5 of them. and you're going to list out what type of error it was, mention what your error was and how you correct it, the rule that was broken. You can either use my version of it, or you can look it up in the writer's reference, and then show how you correct that error. Now, some of these are pretty simple. Some of them are just grammatical errors, and many of you are better writers than you may think you are. And so you haven't made a huge number of errors, but list all the errors you're finding over and over again. And if it tends to be more of a structural error than a grammar error, I will let you correct that. You can say in your feedback log that this one doesn't have a necessary page number with it, and explain how you're going to address that kind of error in the future. The next thing is our final reflection forum. This is your final course reflections. You are not required to have an initial post and a response post. They will all be graded on your initial post. That said, if you choose to respond to each other in the forum about what you said, those thoughts are useful. I read them as well to try to get an understanding of how to better hone this course next time. And so I encourage the conversation. It is not due until Sunday night, but you can always do this sooner. And I actually kind of encourage you doing it sooner. One, so it's not hanging over your head while you're trying to get the argument essay done, but also just so that other people can look at it and learn from your insights as well. So then, of course, the big essay is the argumentation essay. Most of the information is here, but if you need it, don't forget that there is also the final argumentation essay prompt. It makes clear that 4 to 5 pages is 1,000 to 1,250 words. You have to have 3 credible sources, MLA format. I notice one thing that people do incorrectly in in-text citations so far is they'll say 1, 2, 3 instead of actually using the in-text citation style recommended by the MOA handbook or by the Purdue Online Reading Lab, which you will see here. So always refer to how this shows you to do in-text citations if you're in doubt. And so that is the big essay, so concentrate most of your effort on that. And then, of course, you're going to be asked to revise an essay. I know that the syllabus mentioned that you're going to revise both of them. I personally would rather you focus more on the argumentation essay and revising one of these essays. So you'll choose either your process analysis or cause and effect essay and go back through and revise it. And revising doesn't just mean going back and making proofreading changes, the sentence level changes coming from grammar and spelling, but also rethinking structure, ideas, order of operations, that sort of stuff. So consider some of those concepts as well. And finally, you'll be asked to do a demonstration learning. This is a short presentation that you will be uploading to in a forum context. You should be able to upload a file, or if it seems to be too big to upload, upload it to Prezi or SoundCloud, or to Prezi or YouTube or something of that sort. And you'll just make a 10 or 15 slide PowerPoint or Prezi or a short video no longer than 5 minutes. And you can use any of your 3 essays, process analysis, cause and effect, or argumentative essay, as a topic for the demonstration. So you'll take what you studied for either the argumentative or the cause and effect essay, and you'll try to explain it to other people as well as you can. So here's an example of a Prezi that goes through a process analysis. This is not from any of your coworkers, but it kind of goes through and shows what they were discussing with. These are, of course, meant to go with a person standing in front discussing these, because you're not going to have that unless you're recording your voice over it. You should make the text on the screen a little bit more clear about what it is exactly you're discussing. This is not going to be graded too tightly in terms of grammar and spelling. What it's going to be is how well did you convert your knowledge, your understanding, into another medium besides just a text medium, as well as how well you are able to understand your information to teach somebody else. As they say, you'll never gain a greater understanding of what you know until you've had to teach it to others. So that can be uploaded by Sunday at midnight as well. And that is the final assignment for this whole set. If you have any questions or concerns about previous grades, don't forget you can turn in certain things late, especially if you have a good reason. For among other things, some people may not have been aware of all of the assignment requirements, or may have there may have been some sort of technical glitch. Always contact me through email, or I can be around for my office hours for most of this week if you need it. Or of course, I have my overall Ask Isaac forum, so you can ask me questions. And if there is any reason to delay turning one of these things in, within reason, I do have to get these grades back pretty soon next week. But a day or two of flex time, if you need it for good reason, make certain you contact me about it. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure teaching you, and I hope that if you have any questions, you can ask me, and I will see you around.